Narcissism Personality Disorder and Other Personality Disorders. Like I mentioned, this is a part of our Lunch and Learn programs, which is done on the first Thursday of the month at noon. And we have a variety of different lunch and learns that we're doing this year. But last year we covered the most common mental health disorders. So if you're interested in seeing those videos, you can still get them online. But if you are interested in joining us for future ones and you want to be part of the discussion, ask questions in real time, the date to have on your calendar for our next one is, I believe it's May 5th. So that's something to keep in mind. If you are not familiar with the Hope and Healing Center, I'd love to talk about it a little bit. So the Hope and Healing Center is a nonprofit organization, and we're based here in Houston, Texas, and we operate under a four-part approach. So we have educational programs, which are a little bit different than what we're doing today. This is a training. In our educational programs, we invite different speakers in the mental health world to come and talk. We've done some on addiction. We've done some on different topics. And that is something that we do here at our center in person, as well as there's a virtual component too. The next approach is the training branch, which is the Gateway to Hope. And in Gateway to Hope, we offer trainings to workplaces, to organizations, schools, and faith communities. And these trainings, there's different types of trainings that we do, but our most common one or most popular one is Empower. And Empower is a 2-hour training. It can be faith-based or it can be secular, depending on who we're working with. Obviously, when we go to schools, we don't do the faith component unless it's a faith-based school. And those trainings are free. So if you are here joining us today and you think, oh, well, I think my faith community would really benefit from having a general mental health training, keep that in mind. You can reach out to us and we can set that up for you at no cost. And it's a really good training to just get everyone on the same page regarding mental health and the importance of having this awareness and education. So reach out if you're interested in that. The next thing that we offer at the Hope and Healing Center is free clinical services. So this is for people who have a diagnosed mental health condition. They're able to apply to be one of the clients that we see. And this is also free of cost. So it's typically reserved for those who the financial aspect is a barrier for them to receive these types of care and clinical services. And then finally, we have a research department specifically on the aging population, and that is the CARES department. So if you ever have any questions about caregiving or the aging population or dementia, anything like that, we have another designated department that focuses on that. And if you are dealing with someone in that range and you want me to connect you to those people over there, I can certainly do that as well. So we do a lot of things here at the Hope and Healing Center, but what we're doing here today is one of the trainings that we do as a part of the Gateway to Hope program. So like I mentioned, today we're going to be talking about narcissism and other personality disorders. Our next Lunch and Learn is May 4th, and we're going to be covering how to get a loved one to seek help for their mental health. So a lot of times people will ask, okay, well, I have someone in my life who I think really needs to get help, but they will refuse to get help, or they're a little hesitant or resistant on reaching out to a mental health professional. And that actually goes in what we're going to be talking about today as well. So if this is a situation that applies to you, make sure you join us next month for our Lunch and Learn then. And then I'm happy to answer questions. So we can open up the chat. The chat is open during the whole conversation. So if you have a question, if I say something that you want clarification on, or if you have questions about the topic or anything that we do here at Gateway to Hope or the Hope and Healing Center, you can say it in the chat. But after, I'll have some space for people to unmute themselves and ask questions that they may have as well. And then we also have a survey that will come after this meeting ends, and as well as in a follow-up email where I'll send you the materials and what we talked about, as well as a survey. So how we operate with the training branch here is we operate under the 4 Rs. So something really important to keep in mind is that I'm not here teaching you how to diagnose someone with narcissism disorder, because that's not something that is attainable for everyone, considering that most of us are not mental health professionals with the appropriate licenses to diagnose. All we want to do is to be able to recognize that there's signs of a mental health disorder, specifically a personality disorder for today's conversation. That's all we need to do. And what happens typically when someone is interested in helping others with mental health is that they think that they think like, oh, well, how do I know if someone's having a bad day or if they're stressed or anxiety? And that's actually, you're already starting to teeter in on the field of diagnosing. So what we always want to make sure we go back to is that we're just recognizing the possible signs, because a lot of the times people don't have the awareness of these possible signs, and a lot of people will fall through the cracks. And you'll hear things like, well, I had no idea that they were struggling. And so what we want to do is we want to bring these signs to light, just so people don't fall through the cracks. And so everyone in the population has a baseline idea of what this possibly could be. So that's our first R. And specifically, we're going to talk about how to recognize personality disorders, as well as what are they, because to be able to recognize them, we need to know what the different personality disorders are. And specifically, we're going to focus on narcissism. Then we need to know how to refer someone to get help. So we're going to talk about the different providers that are in place, how you get a loved one to seek mental health, and we'll cover that a little more in detail next time. But all about the mental health system and what type of barriers you might run into when you're trying to get a loved one to help, or even yourself. Then we're going to talk about how to relate to someone with personality disorder or narcissism. And then finally, we're going to talk about how to restore. So what different practices or systems can you help facilitate to put into place? That way your community is a restorative community, whether that's support groups, whether that's you becoming a mental health coach and being that point person for mental health in your organization, the different services that we offer, that you can take advantage of and help transform your community, whatever community you're a part of. It could be church, it could be your workplace, it could be a school, to make these places a safe space for someone who's struggling with mental health, and how you can do that. So those are our 4 Rs, and we're going to talk about them in relationship to narcissism disorder, as well as other personality disorders. So first, we're going to talk about how to recognize a mental health problem. And before we get into that, I want to introduce this idea that mental health exists on a continuum. So it is a case-by-case basis for every situation. So something is, we all know about depression, right? Someone could have a depression that doesn't interfere with their daily life. They can function, they can recognize that they're maybe in a depressive episode, but it's not as severe that they need to be hospitalized. Someone can also have depression and it's so severe that they need to be hospitalized for it. Maybe they need to be in an inpatient facility. And someone could have depression and they're feeling great today and their symptoms are at bay. All of this just goes to show that every single person exists on a mental health continuum at one point or another, and the point also moves. So if you're someone with a history of mental illness, just because you're having a bad day today doesn't mean that it's going to always be bad, but the opposite still exists. So if you're feeling great today, doesn't mean that you can just stop doing the things that are keeping you healthy just because you're feeling good, because you have to also just have this understanding that it can move in one way or another. And depending on where you are on this continuum, there's different levels of care that are going to be appropriate for what you need. So if you exist on this continuum in mental health or mental well-being, but you're facing some stress, it's going to be appropriate for you to reach out to a friend or a loved one, a family member, a mentor to sort of receive some help from them and some support. But if you're at the side of the continuum where you're at a mental health problem, it's going to be more appropriate for you to reach out to a counselor, a therapist, a mental health professional, maybe even a doctor, someone who can prescribe medication. So this all just goes to show that if someone has a personality disorder, it also exists on a continuum. So someone can have narcissistic personality disorder, but it's not as severe as someone else who has the same disorder. And then to add another layer onto that, a lot of people with personality disorders also have co-occurring disorders. So they're oh my gosh, I'm having trouble saying that word. The co-occurring disorder can also contribute to the severity of their pre-existing personality disorder. So that's something else to keep in mind. So it might seem a little bit overwhelming, but it's just for me to reiterate that every single person is a different scenario and it's not a one size fits all. And that if you're faced with someone with a personality disorder or even another mental health disorder, it's important that you just look at the person in front of you and assess them and work with them just on what they're displaying. But again, keep in mind that this is not professional advice or medical advice. This is just some information that might help you just understand this disorder a little bit better. So what are personality disorders? Personality disorders are mental health conditions that affect the way an individual perceives themselves, perceives situations, or perceives different stressors or situations that come up. Excuse me. So personality disorders, there's different types, and there's a bunch that fall into these three clusters. So there's cluster A personality disorders, cluster B personality disorders, and cluster C personality disorders. And I'm going to talk about the different clusters and the personality disorders that exist in those clusters. So cluster A personality disorders, they're characterized by odd thinking and behaviors. So again, keep in mind that the severity will vary depending on the person. But when you think of cluster A personality disorders, it's important to think that these people will have different ways of thinking or different behaviors associated with how they think. So when we talk about these, a lot of people will have delusional thinking, specifically, well, no, you'll see delusional thinking with all three of these. So they will see something and they'll think it means something else. So important to note here, delusion is different than a hallucination. A delusion is something that's actually there, but they tie a different meaning to it. So they might say, oh, I just saw a green car. This might mean that someone is watching me or someone's out to get me. And you'll see that a lot with paranoid personality disorder or the other ones in this one. So that's a delusion, and a hallucination is seeing something that's actually not there. And that can happen in psychosis or in schizotypal personality disorder if it's very severe. So paranoid personality disorder. Paranoid personality disorder, the biggest takeaway here is someone who is really mistrusting of others. So they will perceive the way someone looks at them in a different way that harbors mistrust or suspicion. And this is all unfounded, right? So they have no reason to believe this logically, but because they have a personality disorder, they do have a mistrust about the people around them. They have suspicion about people and their motives. There's an unfounded belief that others are trying to harm you or deceive you. There's a mistrust in the trustworthiness of others or their loyalty. These individuals have a tendency to hold on to grudges. If they are in a romantic relationship, these people are more susceptible to jealousy or suspicion that their partner is being unfaithful. They will take not harmful comments as being harmful, or they'll take it as a slight to them when that's not the case. So that's paranoid personality disorder. The next one that we're going to talk about is schizoid personality disorder. So this one, although it does kind of look like schizophrenia, you might think it's very related to it. This isn't the case. So schizoid personality disorder, some of the characteristics associated with it is a lack of interest in personal relationships or social activities. These individuals will typically prefer to be alone. They're reserved and isolated. Their tone of voice might be very monotone. They might appear to be very cold or indifferent to others. So that's schizoid personality disorder. The next one is very similar in the way that it's spelled. So this one's schizotypal personality disorder. And this one, it's not specifically schizophrenia, although sometimes they do coexist. But this one is someone who has some delusions. If they're in a psychosis, they might have hallucinations as well. These people will have odd perceptual experiences. So they might hear someone whisper their name. These individuals will also have a flat inflection in their voices, so also very monotone. They might be really uncomfortable in social settings. So they might have social anxiety. That might be another co-occurring disorder, or just anxiety being in social situations. These individuals will lack social relationships because of this a lot of the time. So they'll struggle having these close, intimate relationships, as well as really all personality disorders. One of the biggest indicators is a struggle establishing and maintaining close personal relationships. Because of the way this person acts, it makes it really difficult for them to maintain friendships and relationships. The next little thing that I want to talk about, schizotypal personality disorder, is that these individuals will have something called magical thinking. So it's this delusional belief that they can influence how others think just because of their thoughts. So that's magical thinking, and that's seen in these personality disorders. And again, they see things and they perceive that these objects or occurrences or things that happen on the news, there's a specific message just for them. So those are all the cluster A personality disorders. So again, odd thinking and behaviors, they're perceiving things in a way that is not real. And a really good way to think about this, sorry about that, a really good thing to think about this is they perceive things that are happening in the outside world in a different way. Because of some other personality disorders, the other clusters, it's more how they see themselves. So these individuals see things that happen outside of themselves and they interpret it in a different way. For example, with narcissism, which you can see is not a cluster A personality disorder, these people view themselves in a different way. So hopefully that'll help you distinguish the different clusters. So the next cluster is cluster B. And this is characterized by overly emotional or unpredictable behavior. So again, this is an individual who sees themselves in a different perception, and it influences the way that they act. So the first one here is antisocial personality disorder. And with just the title, you can start to sort of predict what type of symptoms this individual may have. There's antisocial personality disorder, someone who has a lack of empathy. They might not be aware or care to become aware of other people's needs or emotional concerns. A lot of times these individuals will display behaviors that are dangerous, such as lying, stealing, conning other individuals. So these individuals can be dangerous and harmful. A lot of people in the history who have been dangerous people can have this diagnosis as well. There's a violation of other people's rights. There's aggressive or violent behavior, impulsive behavior, and a distrust in the safety of themselves or others. So that's antisocial personality disorder. So if you think of the word antisocial personality disorder, it doesn't mean that this person is just in their home and they don't want to be social. Although you would think that's what it means, what antisocial really means is that this person has no interest in being liked or doing what is right in a social aspect. They're someone who really is not looking out for the needs of others. And because of that, they have no empathy and they have no hesitation in lying or cheating or stealing or being aggressive or dangerous. The next one that I'm going to talk about is borderline personality disorder. And you might have heard this one because it's one of the more common ones. But borderline personality disorder is someone who it displays two different types of personalities. It's not like bipolar, because with bipolar, what we typically see is episodes of manic and depressive episodes. But this is someone who might not fall into that, but they struggle to feel really neutral, and they struggle to feel regulated with their emotions. So some of the symptoms that you will see with borderline personality disorder is unstable or intense relationships, someone who has up and down moods, they don't really know how to react to stress, just someone who has a really hard time regulating their emotions. These individuals might have suicidal thoughts or self-harm behaviors. They might have an intense feeling of being abandoned. They might display anger. So it's someone who's just feeling a lot of emotions in an outward way and has a difficulty regulating in a normal way. And then, of course, something that I want to mention here is everyone has, bad days or times where they feel unstable, but this is someone who has a persistent history of having an inability to stabilize themselves. So this is a persistent thing. It's not just that someone had, a really bad day where they were crying one moment, laughing another moment, but it's just a one day kind of thing. That's not the case here. This is someone who has a persistent history of not being able to, reply appropriately to different situational issues. So that's borderline personality disorder. The next one is histrionic personality disorder. So these individuals will oftentimes be very flashy. They're constantly seeking attention. They might have also changing emotions. They have very strong opinions. They speak dramatically, and they're easily influenced by others. Again, this is more than just a personality type. When it gets to be a personality disorder, it's gotten to the point where this individual is so affected by their personality disorder that they're having issue functioning in a normal way. So they can't maintain relationships because of their personality disorder. They might have a difficulty holding down a job, or having a romantic partner because of their personality disorder. So it's not safe to assume that someone who's really out there and wears flashy clothes, we're just going to label them as having histrionic personality disorder, because that could get really harmful. And that's actually something that we do see commonly with narcissistic personality disorder, because people will say, he's a narcissist, and they'll just use the term very casually when it's actually a diagnosable mental health condition. And a vast majority of people do not have narcissistic personality disorder, but it is a term that is thrown around a lot. And you see that with all different types of disorders. People will say, I have anxiety, when they just mean they're stressed, or they'll label someone as, they're bipolar, just because they change their mind and opinions, when that isn't the case. And personally, I think that it's harmful to use these words whenever you're just trying to make a point, because it does diminish the struggle of the people who actually have the disorder. And it furthers this negative stigma around mental health when we throw these words out in these offensive ways. So a lot of times we do see that with narcissistic personality disorder. So that's something I want you to keep in mind as we, start to focus on narcissism, which is our next one that we're going to talk about here in cluster B. And I'm going to go more into depth about narcissism after I cover the third cluster. But narcissistic personality disorders, some of the things that you'll see there is a belief that you're more special than others, or that you're superior than others. And because of this, that you deserve more, you deserve the best office, the best job, the best car, because of your belief that you're superior to others. These individuals will often fantasize about power or success, or attractiveness. Oftentimes these individuals will be arrogant. They'll struggle again to recognize other people's needs and feelings. They may exaggerate their talents or their achievements, and they might be envious of others who they perceive to be more successful than them or more attractive than them. And like I said, we'll go over narcissistic personality a little more in depth since that is the focus of today's conversation. And then finally, we have cluster C personality disorders. These are all characterized by anxious or fearful thoughts or behaviors. So it's very anxiety inducing to have any of these personality disorders in cluster C. So the first one that we're going to talk about is avoidant personality disorder. So with avoidant personality disorder, this individual will struggle to receive criticism. They might feel unattractive or have low self-worth. They might feel inadequate or inferior. They might have social issues. So they might have a really hard time maintaining relationships. They might avoid new activities, refrain from social events. They're fearful of being ridiculed or being in a socially awkward situation. They might be extremely shy. So this is someone who is just avoiding any sort of social situation because of the anxiety that they have with being in social situations or the way that they're being perceived in those social situations. So they're avoiding all of these things. So that's avoidant personality disorder. The next one is dependent personality disorder. And what you'll see with dependent personality disorder, or the individuals who have this, is an extreme dependence on someone else. So these people do not like to be alone. They might display clinginess or submissive behaviors to those in their close relationships with. They might tolerate abusive treatment because of their fear to be alone. They lack self-confidence a lot of the time. They might struggle to make even small decisions. So these individuals will have low self-esteem, low self-worth, low confidence in their ability to make decisions, to start projects. And like I mentioned, they will struggle to be alone. And because of this, they will stay in unhealthy dynamics, and they might be victims of abuse as well. They oftentimes will struggle to disagree or to voice their opinions because of this disorder. And then the next one is obsessive compulsive personality disorder. So there is like a little misconception with obsessive compulsive personality disorder and OCD. So obsessive compulsive disorder is one thing, and obsessive compulsive personality disorder is another thing. So OCD, which we've covered in a previous Lunch and Learn, that is an anxiety disorder. So that's someone who has a lot of intrusive thoughts, and their intrusive thoughts will lead them to do different compulsions to, ease the anxiety of those thoughts. So you might see someone who is having anxiety about something being uneven, and they have assigned a meaning to that. And until something is even, they're not going to feel at peace because of the meaning that they've attached to it. So that's obsessive compulsive disorder. And I'm not going to get more into detail with that since we have covered it in another Lunch and Learn. But what I want to say here is when a lot of people think, oh, I have OCD, or I like things to be organized and I'm very type A and I'm OCD, what they're really talking about is obsessive compulsive personality disorder, because there is no that feeling of needing things to be organized isn't really an OCD thing. It's an obsessive compulsive personality disorder thing. So what you'll see with someone who has obsessive compulsive personality disorders is typically what people think of when they think of OCD. So this is someone who wants to follow the rules. They're extremely preoccupied with organization, with cleanliness, perfectionism, to a point where it causes dysfunction. So this might be someone who can't sleep because something is messy in their house, or maybe they cannot turn in an assignment at work or at school because they're so overly concerned with it being perfect that it inhibits their ability to be successful because of the disorder. These individuals will oftentimes have a really hard time letting go of old objects or broken objects. They want to hold on to them. They want to be in control of themselves, in control of other people. They are going to struggle with delegating tasks because of that perfectionism associated with obsessive compulsive personality disorder. They might be very controlling and they like to run a tight ship. They like things in a certain way. And it's not, you have to remember, this is a personality disorder. So it's a mental health condition. So it's not just someone who, oh, I like to have my things extremely organized because that's how I like them. It's actually very disabling to that person to not have their things the way they want it. So it can be something that's very uneasy for that individual. So it's not just someone who likes things clean, it's someone who is distressed if they don't have the things that they want it to be. So of course, if you don't have a personality disorder and you look at these things, you might just think, oh, that's just their character, or that's just the way that their personality is. But you have to remember that if someone's diagnosed with this, it's something that is very, very distressing for them to not have the things in the way that they want them to be. Just a couple more things about this. They might be rigid or stubborn, and they might neglect friendships or activities because they have an excessive commitment to their work or their project or to keeping their things tidy and in line. So that's obsessive compulsive personality disorder. But like I've mentioned, we're gonna talk a little more in depth about narcissistic personality disorder, which is NPD for short. So the word narcissism, like I mentioned, is often used to describe someone who is self-absorbed. So if someone's just self-centered or thinking about themselves first, oftentimes this word will be thrown around and people will say, oh, this person has narcissism or they're really narcissistic. But the reality is that narcissism is a diagnosable mental health condition that includes thinking highly of oneself, needing constant admiration, believing that others are inferior, or lacking empathy for others. People who have NPD have a really hard difficulty establishing and maintaining personal relationships. And about 5% of the population has NPD, and it is more common in men than women. How do you recognize that someone has narcissistic personality disorder? Someone might have an unreasonably high sense of self. So maybe they don't have their achievements to back up what they're saying, but they truly believe that they're the best at something. They will oftentimes feel that they deserve more. So they feel this innate belief that they are superior, and because of that, they deserve more money, they deserve more material objects, more admiration, more praise, and things like that. Because they are so self-absorbed and they have this unreasonably high sense of self, they're going to have a really difficult time understanding the needs of others and their feelings, and they're going to have a difficulty showing empathy or feeling empathy. They will also insist on having the best in everything, the best car, the best office, the best job. And sometimes they will take advantage of others to get what they want. Not all people who have narcissistic personality disorder are abusive or dangerous, but sometimes they are. So I don't like to make any generalizations, but that's just something to keep in mind, that not all narcissistic personality disorder individuals are abusive, but it's not unheard of for this to happen. So sometimes they can be. So that's something that you need to keep in mind. If you're with someone and you're putting yourself in a dangerous situation, even though we want to help as many people as we can, it's important to keep yourself safe first. And if you find yourself in a dangerous situation, so just make sure that you call 911 and you get the help that you need. So what causes NPD? And this is actually true for several of the personality disorders. Experts have found that it's a combination of factors. So it's not just a genetic thing, but genetics does play a part in it. It's not just about your childhood experiences, but your childhood experiences can play a part in it. Some of the other factors are parenting styles or trauma. Genetics, like I mentioned, if your parent has NPD, you're more susceptible to developing the disorder, but that is not the only factor. Different parenting styles. So for example, with the obsessive compulsive personality disorder, if you were in a really rigid household where rules were strictly enforced and things had to be in a really precise way, you might develop this disorder. But alternatively, if you were in a household where things were just completely out of control all the time, you might also develop this disorder as a coping mechanism in your adulthood. So based off the trauma of having such a chaotic childhood, you may now revert to having things super, super organized and super routine and rigid as a way to manage that anxiety of your childhood in a way that you now feel that you have control. But again, these things are dysfunctional and they can cause a lot of distress for the individual if it's not treated. So it's something that can be very distressing. It's not just someone who's really organized, it's someone who their need to be organized or their need to be different things can inhibit their purpose and inhibit their ability to be happy, to have relationships, and all of these things. So how do you refer, or what types of treatment exist for personality disorders? So typically for serious mental health conditions, the gold standard of treatment is medication and therapy. But personality disorders do not respond to medication. So personality disorders alone are not treated with medication. But what oftentimes happens is that people with personality disorders will most likely have another disorder that co-occurs with their disorder. So many people who have been diagnosed with a personality disorder will also be prescribed medication, but it's typically there to address the co-occurring disorder. So someone who has obsessive compulsive personality disorder, for example, they might have a lot of anxiety revolving their disorder. And so then they might also have an anxiety disorder, and they might get medication to help their anxiety disorder. And in turn, that might help the symptoms of their personality disorder. But medication is never prescribed specifically for the personality disorder alone. But it's not uncommon for people with personality disorders to be on medication for another co-occurring disorder. A lot of times people with personality disorders will be on antidepressants because antidepressants help stabilize your brain, not just for depression, but also for anxiety, maybe for OCD, and different things. So it's not uncommon for them to have medication, but it's not just addressing the personality disorder. It's typically prescribed to help the symptoms of a co-occurring disorder, which is very common to have more than one if you have a personality disorder. For personality disorders alone, though, therapy is one of the best things that these people can do because of the nature of these disorders and the fact that it's so tied to interpersonal relationships and social aspects. Group therapy is a really amazing way for these people to get those social skills that they might be lacking, those empathy skills that they might be lacking, and help them relate to others, which is something that people with personality disorders really need. Family and individual therapy can also be effective avenues. A lot of the times, if someone within a family unit has a personality disorder, it's affected the family and the family dynamics greatly. So having a family therapy is going to be really helpful for these individuals and their families to cope with maybe history that has been as a result of this personality disorder. So family therapy is a really good avenue for these individuals and their families, as well as group therapy, because it helps them strengthen their social skills. And then also, of course, individual therapy is a great avenue for that person to unload their own trauma. Maybe they don't feel comfortable doing this in a group therapy or in front of their family. So individual therapy in combination with these therapies is really going to help that individual heal and learn how to cope with their personality disorder in a way that doesn't inhibit them from living a purposeful and meaningful life with relationships. And so therapy is a really great way for these people to do that, whether that's group, individual, or family. Therapy is the best thing for them to do. So when you think about receiving treatment, these are the types of professionals in the mental health sphere. We have primary care doctors, and this is on this list because it's the most accessible professional on this list. Unfortunately, there's not enough mental health providers in the system currently, and most Americans do receive their mental health medication from their primary care doctor. So it's also a really good way. Most people already have yearly checkups. So if you're someone who maybe has a loved one that you think might have a personality disorder, you can encourage them to bring that up next time they go to a checkup. And that's a really accessible way to get referred to a professional, get referred to a support group, or even get put on medication for a co-occurring disorder that is showing up with your personality disorder. The next one is counselors and therapists. Counselors and therapists are those that will do talk therapy. So those that will do group therapy, individual therapy, all of those types of therapies that revolve around the individual talking and seeing where their beliefs came from. All of that is done by counselors and therapists, and sometimes psychiatrists. But psychiatrists will primarily focus on medication, medication management, symptoms, adjusting doses, and things like that. And then we have hospital and treatment facilities. And this is more for those critical cases of someone maybe attempting suicide or someone who is in a really intense state of psychosis and things like that. We always recommend, if you can, to just have the list, numbers, and address of one or two of these professionals just for you to have. If you're working with people with mental health needs, it's just better to have it before you need it. So if you have some time to make this list of referrals for your community, that's going to really help you out in the long term, because you just never know when you'll need it. And it's better to just have it than to look from scratch when you're in the middle of a mental health crisis for yourself or for a loved one or for someone in your community. So for relating to someone with narcissistic personality disorder, like I mentioned, narcissistic abuse is something that does happen, not necessarily always going to happen with someone who has narcissism, but it's something to be aware of. So if you find yourself worried about your safety, please call 911. And please make sure that you're keeping yourself safe and that you're prioritizing that. As much as you love someone, as much as you want to help them or be there for them, if it's getting to a point where you're in an abusive situation, things do need to change before you're able to help them. So make sure that you are aware of that. And if you are concerned about your safety, please call 911 and get yourself to safety before you try to help. And just make sure that you're evaluating your relationships and your safety before anything else. If you're working with a narcissistic person or someone that you suspect might have this, you want to be firm, but you don't want to be accusatory. Because with personality disorders and specifically narcissism, if you tell someone, hey, I think you are a narcissist or you have narcissistic personality disorder, you can expect that they're going to get defensive. And so the way that you word it and the way that you approach it, that's going to be a big key for you. So you don't want to be accusatory, and you don't want to do this in retaliation during an argument. The best way maybe to approach this is, hey, I was reading up on this, and I saw a couple of things that I think you might want to look into. And maybe it'll help you in your other relationships or with the things that you're struggling. If you get treatment for it, just maybe talk to someone about these symptoms, and maybe just send them an article or send them something that might help them look at it. And the best way to do this is just to not be accusatory, to be as neutral and objective as possible, and just provide them with the information and allow them to make the call. Another thing that you can do at this stage is normalize receiving mental health treatment. So instead of saying something like, oh, you're a narcissist, you need to go seek help immediately, you can just frame it in a way of, hey, these symptoms, that they might be something that you're interested in reading. And if you are, maybe just make a call to a therapist. There's no shame in receiving mental health care. A lot of people receive mental health care. There's nothing wrong with it. And at the end of the day, it's only going to help you feel better, and it's going to help you maintain better relationships. So the more you normalize receiving help or going to a therapist, the less scary it's going to be for that person, and the less they're going to feel that it's a personal flaw that they have that is bringing them into the therapy room. So just normalize it and frame it in a way that it's just going to make your life better if you're able to deal with some of these symptoms. Now we're going to talk about how to restore through a supportive community. So we talked about personality disorders and the treatments associated with them, one of those being group therapy and group support groups. So if you're interested in starting a support group, I'm not sure if you're aware of that, we actually provide training and the curriculum for 15 weeks of support group. So all you would have to do is facilitate it, find a place to do it. But all of the content we could provide for you. We have 3 different support groups. One of those is for people with a diagnosed mental health condition. So for example, personality disorders. And this is something that you can facilitate in your church, in your organization, and you can just invite people to come and talk. And this is really helpful because it's free. A lot of times people don't want to receive mental health care because it can be expensive. So if you open this door, it's a free way for people to come and learn how to relate to others. They'll feel less alone. They'll have that sense of community. And specifically for personality disorders, this is huge. This is something that is a priority for them. In feeling better and in learning how to relate to others. So if you're interested in a support group, let us know and we can get you set up with that training. And then it is free of cost. So if you're interested, please reach out and let us know. We also, like I mentioned at the beginning, we have our Empower training and we have our mental health coach training. So if what you've learned today is interesting to you and you really want to immerse yourself in more training, there's definitely so many resources at Gateway to Hope to fill your needs. Mental health coach training is our most intensive training. And it does help you know how to relate to a person and provide coaching for them, for their families, one-on-one. And we have so many resources for mental health coaches. We do meetings like this with just the mental health coaches in the community. So this can help them network with each other, help each other if they have issues, if something came up with one of the people that they coach. They can get insight from other people. We have a Facebook group for coaches. We have stuff on our app that's just for coaches. So we have a lot of resources to help our coaches and anyone else who's looking for resources, reach out and we can help you out. Another free resource that I want to mention is the Hope Line. And the Hope Line is a free resource that you can call from 5 to 8, and you can just have free 30 minutes of peer support. So these people are trained in peer support. So you just had a really bad day and work was crazy, or maybe you're dealing with someone with a personality disorder, or maybe you have a personality disorder, you just need someone to talk to. You can call this number and you can talk to them for free. But something else they can do for you is they can help you get a referral. So maybe you can call and say, oh, my loved one, I think might have narcissistic personality disorder. We live in this area and we have this insurance and they only speak Spanish. Based on that criteria, they'll be able to give you a referral that fits your needs. And so it's a really good resource to have. Something to note is that only adults can call. So we want to make sure no one under the age of 18 is calling. And this number is open. A question that we always get, is it only for people in Houston? And the answer is no. You can call from anywhere and get the same supportive services that you'll get if you're in Houston. So it's a good number to jot down. It'll also be in the resources that I send you, but you just never know when you might need this number. So it's a good idea to just have it on you. And then again, this is just for people who need some support. So it's what we call a warm line. Not a hotline. So if someone is in crisis or in an emergency, this is not the number to call. 911 would be the number to call for those instances. This is just someone who needs that support or who needs a referral. Some other resources that I want to talk about is our website. It's in English and Spanish, Mental Health Gateway. That's where you can get the trainings that I've talked about. So our previous Lunch and Learns, you can get it on our website. We also have blogs. We also have articles on different disorders. And so this is a really good place for you to go and look if you want more education about mental health trainings, or if you want to get access to the previous Lunch and Learns that we've done. I mentioned the app already, but if you haven't downloaded it, it's a free app. We have mental health resources, videos, workbooks, PDFs. If you're a mental health coach, there's a forum for you to talk to other coaches on there. And there's easy access to trainings, there's guides. It's a lot of really good, valuable information, and we're always updating it. So we will add more things to it periodically. So if you haven't downloaded it, I really do recommend that you download it. That way you can have it at your fingertips, and you can have that information available to you whenever it might come up that you need it. We also have an Instagram account, Gateway to Hope GTH. We send out newsletters if you're interested of what trainings are coming up, what events are coming up, did you knows, different things like that. And we also have a YouTube channel where we do different videos such as breathing exercises that will walk you along how to do grounding exercises and things like that. So now I'm going to read the chat to see if there's any questions that I might have missed during the conversation. So if you have any questions at this point, it's a good time to put it in the chat. If you think of a question later on, my email is on the screen as well as my phone number. And that will also be a good contact for you to reach out if you want us to bring a training to your organization. Or you can also reach out to my colleague, Mariana, who's been answering questions in the chat as well. And we can help you get that set up. Okay. So I don't see any questions at this point, but I'll give a couple minutes just to see if anyone's typing it up. I would hate to close out the meeting and someone's typing out a question. But like I said, my phone number and my email are on screen. So if you do think of a question later on, you could just let me know in that way, as well as if you want us to come and train your organization for free. You can also unmute yourself if you want to ask a question verbally, but it doesn't look like there's going to be too many questions. Let's see what the time is. Yeah, we're about almost at 1 o'clock. So maybe we don't have any questions. But yes, like Mariana said, thank you so much for coming. I think it's really great that you prioritized. Okay, so someone said, I have a friend whose significant other has NPD. How do I help her? So I think one of the biggest things that you can do, like I mentioned, is to just normalize receiving mental health care. That way she will feel more comfortable going to therapy with her partner, and things like that. Just making her feel less isolated is probably the best thing you can do as a friend. And anyone can benefit from therapy. And having her really understand that will make her more likely to engage in therapy with her significant other. Someone asked if the trainings are only available in Texas. No. So we can do all of our trainings virtually, just like we're doing it today for your organization. And if it's a training that we've done in the past that now is online, you can just register online and take the training. But if you want a live training outside of Texas, then we'll just be doing it on Zoom. Okay. If you have any other questions, if you have questions about the trainings or anything like that, please reach out to the contact information on screen. I also know Mariana put her contact information in the chat. So don't hesitate to reach out to us if you have any questions. I think that's all we have for today. So thank you again for joining us, and I hope you found this helpful. Please don't forget to fill out the survey. And so that'll let us know how we did, how we can improve, and it'll pop up at the end of the screen as well as in the follow-up email that I send you. And that just really helps us know how we did and how we can improve.